Thank you. Well, it's terrific to be here, and the few of you that were hollering out, thank you. It means a lot. Last time I was here, it was a banquet, and there was round tables. People were sitting out. One guy was sitting by himself. He had the glasses, just the look of somewhat liberal, but hey, I want to be friendly. Conservatives are friendly people. I walked up, put on my best smile, and said, "Are you sitting here alone?" And he said, "I sure hope so." So anyway, any kind of warmth at all is really appreciated, but thank you. Some good points have been made here. Now, I owed the Army 4 years from a scholarship at Texas A&M, and I served in the Army under Commander Jimmy Carter. How about that? Yes. Now, one of the things that we've heard over and over again since Vietnam is, well, we don't want to get in another unwinnable war like Vietnam. I'm not going to debate the merits of whether we should or should not have gone to Vietnam, but what I will tell you is Vietnam was winnable, but people in Washington decided we would not win it. Now, you want to know if it was winnable? Read the end of Sam Johnson's book. POW in Hanoi Hilton for 7 years, the majority of that in isolation because they couldn't break his will. As he's leaving, if you know the history of what happened, Nixon says we'll get out of it. They go to Paris, they have the peace talks. The North Vietnamese make a huge deal out of storming out. And then he carpet bombed North Vietnam and specifically Hanoi for 2 weeks. They rush back to the table and we surrender in effect. And then the POWs are being released. They've been through the worst kind of atrocities you could imagine. Sam said the meanest officer was laughing, said, "You stupid Americans, don't you know if you had bombed us for 1 more week, we would have had to surrender unconditionally?" Folks, when you hear people talk about the lesson of Vietnam, it ought to be this. You don't send American men or women to harm's way unless you're going to give them the authority and what they need to win and then bring them home. That's the lesson of Vietnam. Jimmy Carter, I'm sorry, when our embassy was attacked, it was an act of war in 1979. And I really believed, and we were watching carefully from Fort Benning where I was stationed, and we expected, nobody really wanted to go, but we had been attacked. We expected the United States to respond. And we watched for 3 days where all we did was kind of beg them, well, just let our people go. And after 3 days, they quit saying the students have them, and they started saying we have them, because they saw we didn't have leadership with a will to defend America, as oaths are taken to do. And I still believe today that we have Americans dying for their country because we did not send a message in 1979, you don't attack American soil, and that's what an embassy is. We should stand up. There is a time for war. There's a time for peace. But if you go to war, you better mean it. Now in Afghanistan, people have forgotten because it's dragged on over there. But we won that war. We defeated the Taliban in less than 4 months. During Iraq, when it drug out, people were going, remember Afghanistan? That's the way you fight a war. How did we do that? Now, Steve and I have been over there. We've met with leaders from the Northern Alliance. Perhaps you remember the Northern Alliance. They fought the Taliban and defeated them for us. We had less than 500 American soldiers, special ops and intelligence in Afghanistan when we defeated the Taliban because the Northern Alliance did our work. And now when we meet with the Northern Alliance, this administration calls them war criminals. We shouldn't be meeting with war criminals. Yes, they're Muslim. They're our friends because the enemy of my enemy can be my friend. We gave them military support, some arms. We gave them aerial support. And the greatest battle was when General Dustin, that we've met, and I've met him a number of times, and I consider him a friend, but he's a legend. He led 1,000 horsemen uphill into the face of RPGs, bullets, artillery, and they overtook the Taliban stronghold, and that was the beginning of the very end for the Taliban until after we won. Then we sent in tens of thousands of troops to start occupying. We don't do well, nobody does well occupying, and especially not there. Some have said, well, Louis, Alexander the Great, he conquered that area. He died on the way out. I don't consider that too great of a win when you die leaving the place you thought you won. But anyway, there are ways to do this. And one of the most important things you do is you make sure the world knows that those who are your friends, they benefit from being your friends. But if you're our enemy, you do not benefit. You don't go to the Taliban and say, please come sit down with us and we'll buy you offices in Qatar and we'll release your murdering thugs from Guantanamo and other places. Just no preconditions, just sit down with us. General Dustin said, and he's a legend, he talks to people all over, he said, you would not believe the arrogance of the Pakistani leaders. They're saying, why are they offering to do all this for the Taliban? Don't they know we're supplying the Taliban? They ought to be coming begging us, we'll bribe you, we'll buy you stuff. Instead, they're not even treating us very nice. They send drones over. We ought to send them a lesson. We're the ones in charge of the Taliban. And we had met with the Baluch people. The Baluch Baluchistan is the biggest area of Pakistan. It's the southern area. Most of Pakistan's natural resources are there. Arbitrarily, lines were drawn after World War II, and most of Baluchistan's in Pakistan. The Pakistani government, military, they terrorize the people. They take their mineral resources, and they live off the Baluch people and keep them terrorized. After meeting with Baluch people, and then meeting again with the Northern Alliance leaders, I said to Masood, Dustin, and some of the others, what do you think would happen if we started, just some of us in Washington, encouraging an independent Baluchistan? Some of their eyes got big. Dustin said through an interpreter, that would change everything. You would see the Pakistani arrogance dry up overnight. There are ways to deal with your enemies. You don't have to always go to war. And in fact, right after that, there was, within a week, in the largest newspaper in Pakistan, there was an op-ed in response to one that I did at Dana Rohrabacher, and I inserted one line that simply said, maybe it's time to start talking about an independent Baluchistan as a way to stop the supplying of the Taliban. And in this op-ed, they said, in another interesting development, Louie Gohmert, a U.S. Republican representative, proposed that in order to beat the Taliban, the U.S. should carve out a new friendly state of Baluchistan from within Pakistan to stabilize Afghanistan's western border. Even if Mr. Gohmert does not necessarily speak for Washington, John Boehner would tell you I don't speak for him, but anyway, it's logical to assume he made this observation after picking up the buzz in American political circles. And it goes on to say, well, I'm from Texas, I probably just want their mineral resources. But then they finish by saying, before this loud thinking is embraced as policy by Washington, for our own territorial integrity, maybe we should do away with our double game in the war on terror and politically settle Baluchistan's issues by helping the Afghan Taliban and other jihadi groups. We've only weakened our own country. And they say maybe they ought to be good to Baluch people and stop helping the Taliban. Folks, you don't have to pay people to hate you. They'll do it for free. Benefit your friends. Make sure your enemies suffer for being your enemies. You'll save going to war so often if you do that. But when you do, send all that you've got, win, and come home. Thank you very much.